So right now we're seeing a file called splittest.py reading this top level comment, and it basically says that it's testing string.split. In the real world, of course, we don't need to test any Python library functions. We can assume they're well tested, but we're just doing this as an intro to unit tests. So let's go ahead and see how the code is structured. Now, one thing I wanted to say is we're in lecture 13 now. So by this point, I pretty much expect that you have a good grasp of being able to read through code and understand it. So what I'm going to do instead of just helping you read through the code is explaining some of the best practices that I've been implementing. So for example, right here, I have these constants here. And one thing you'll see is that all of these things, I have like key input, key expected. Instead of having strings in line here, I'm actually using keys, like constant variables, instead of just like hard-coded strings. That way, whenever I reuse this, I can verify that there aren't any typos or anything like that. This is the best practice in the industry. Definitely want to do something like that. The other thing that you'll see is when we're looking at our class, of course, we're going to extend unit test.testCase. That's how you make a unit test in Python. So within the unit test class, within the unit test library, you're going to have a special method called setup. And basically setup is going to run before any test that you have. So if we look at, for example, these two tests here, so we see some like assert equals and stuff like that. That basically indicates to the test runner that it should run this method and it should make sure that all of these things run. However, before we actually run these lines 59 to 65, what we're going to do is do all this setup. We're going to make sure that all of this setup is done once, and then we can go ahead and run all of our tests. I'm not actually sure whether it runs it before each test setup or not. I think that might be a language dependent thing. I know, for example, in Java, it's going to run the setup test before each unit test. And I'm suspecting it's the same in Python, but I'm not actually sure. So what I'm seeing here, let's see how I actually structured the code. So I'm saying setup, and I'm saying that we have some success test parameters. So I'm giving it an input of some string, and then I'm saying this is the expected output. So I'm saying there's a length of this much, there's a first word, and there's a second word. Similarly, there is this as Bone Thugs and Harmony, that's going to be our input. And then our output is going to be the length of it, presumably the first word and the second word. Then there's a to-do here to add another, and then to-do to add another. We also have failure tests. Basically, the failure tests are saying this is our input, and we're expecting that this is going to fail in some way. And I'm not sure how it's going to fail until we actually read through our test runner. So let's go ahead and read through that. So for our success, we would pretty much expect that the input is going to do string.split. We have some expected value. So for example, we have here Childish Gambino, and then our expected output is basically going to be whatever this says, and it's going to be all of this stuff. And then once we have that, we can basically say, okay, we've split this. This is basically our actual value that we got. And now we should see if the length of that equals the length of our expected. We should see if the first word of that, the first word that we have of our split string is equal to the first word of our expected. Same with our second word. So let's go ahead and actually run that. So I'm going to go into my Python file and say, let's run the success case. Let's copy and paste this. It says assertion error 2 not equal to 3. So the way that I'm going to look at that is basically let's go up here and then say, okay, so we're running some tests. We're not sure if it's this one or that one because we didn't like attach a debugger or anything like that. But once I've attached this, or once I see inside of here, 2 is not equal to 3, I can basically say, okay, one of those is the expected value. So the expected value is 3 here, but we expect it to be 2. So obviously when we split Childish Gambino, split is going to basically use a delimiter of spaces. So it's going to split based on spaces. So because of that, we're expecting that the array actually has length 2. And then Childish is the first word and Gambino is the second word. Great. Let's go ahead and run the tests and see what happens. Oh, that was weird. Not sure what's going on there. Okay, so that was a little weird. I just had like some corrupted file for whatever reason, but Now that I'm back, I've changed this to 2, and let's go ahead and see what's going on. I'm going to run the success test again, and it's saying thugs is not equal to figs. So I must have some other problem here. So thugs isn't inside of here, so I'm assuming it's in our second test case. So bone, thugs, and harmony, we expect it to be 4 because we see bone, thugs, and harmony as our 4 words. First word is going to be bone, and our second word is thugs. So let's go ahead and fix that. Cool. And then let's go down here and run it again, and we see, okay, great. Looks good. Let's go ahead and run our failure test. So our failure test says 2 is equal to 2. Assert not equals, and it's actually saying it is 2, so that's not good. So let's look at our assert not equals. So first of all, it's saying that we want our length not equal to the expected length, and we want our first word not to be our first word up here. So let's go ahead and fix this. So the length of Nicki Minaj is actually going to be 2. So this is going to be 1, okay? And the first word is not going to be Nicki Minaj, it's just going to be Nicki. So that looks good. And then Tupac Shakur, the length is actually going to be 2. So anything we have here except 2 should work. So let's try 2000 up here. And then let's go ahead and run this one more time. Okay, and then it's saying it's expected, like Tupac is equal to Tupac. So anything should work here. So just to troll, I'm going to put Biggie Smalls inside of there, and let's see what it says. Cool, it says it's okay. So I'm going to leave this up to you to add another one, basically, but this is how test cases work. Now, you might be wondering why we might ever have failure test cases. So failure cases are basically a good way to be like, hey, cool. So in this situation, the program should error out. Or in this situation, we want to make sure that it doesn't return anything. So that's a good way to just be like, cool, we expect it not to return like whatever the default value might be. So if we're doing like a bot message, and then when we're testing the bot message, we start with something that isn't exclamation, exclamation, then we would expect the bot not to say, I'm a bot, or whatever it's saying. So that's why we might see something like a failure test case. Obviously, this is kind of weird the way that we have it structured, because this isn't really testing anything real. But in the case of something like a failure, or like a bot, then you might want to actually do that so that you can test that it's not calling the bot whenever that happens. So this is a brief introduction to unit testing, and this is one way that you can do unit testing in Python. We're also going to be talking about integration testing in a few minutes.